Good evening. So part of your curriculum, as I understand it, in character and leadership, is to understand some things about empathy. So I was asked to talk you through some things that I've learned about empathy. Let me ask, does anybody have a guess as to what we're talking about here? Not a guess. What do you think empathy means? Yes, please. I'm sorry? Yeah. What do you think empathy is? Understand someone's emotion. That's good. Somebody else? Please. When you feel what the other person is feeling. Very good. Somebody else? How important do you think it is? Yeah. I think we're going to go a long way towards making that clear. So let's consider how it's typically defined. The first is a definition taken from the Oxford English Dictionary. Empathy is the ability to share someone's feelings, like you said, or experiences by imagining what it would be like to be in that person's situation. So it's an act of imagination informed by prior experience and what we know of the other person and so on. It derives from a couple of Greek elements, en, which means into, and pathos, which means feeling. Patheo in Greek means I feel. So empatheo, empathy, means to feel oneself into the feeling state of another. Now, we don't actually have privileged access into the minds and hearts of other people, but we know something of our own experience, right? And we can infer that other people, like ourselves, are very likely to have some of the same qualities of experience that we take for granted as our lot in life, right? And so it's not unreasonable to suppose that things that are true for us might be true for other people in the domain of feelings and experience. Now, the first usage for empathy that in the English language comes from a borrowing from the German Einfühlung, which means feeling into. It was imported into psychology. It was used in German art criticism and art history to explain great works of art. Titchener translated Einfühlung into English as empathy only in 1909. So it's just a little over 100 years old as a word in the English language. It's related to our English word sympathy, which comes from two Greek parts, sum and patheo, to feel together with, and compassione in Latin is the basis for our compassion, which means exactly the same thing, to feel together with. You follow? Sympathy and compassion have been English words for a bit longer. In terms of practice, like actively doing empathy or being empathic, it's feeling and acting in a manner consistent with the fact that we're always already connected. Sometimes people will say, well, science, social science, natural science, whatever, can't possibly speak to issues of morality. I'm here to suggest that the social sciences, social psychology, communication, sociology, cultural anthropology, and the like, have come to conclusions about the fact that human beings affect each other. And of course, this is obvious. We have an impact, especially in interaction with each other, right? So, for example, when you talk with somebody, you take your turn and say your thing, and then whatever they do next is very immediately responsive to something that you just said or did, right? And in that give and take, in that context of exchange, each person conditions what the other person will do next. And it goes back and forth and so on and so on. So there's very immediate evidence in terms of our participation in everyday conversation that we give shape to each other. But some of those encounters lead to much more lasting and more impactful, more intense effects or influences on each other. So for example, if you look at your past life and you say, well, there have been certain people who have really made a difference in my life. Well, those are the most obvious, most intensive experiences of connection. There's a little bit of you in your friends, and there's a little bit of them in you, right? There's certainly a lot of your parents, especially if you've been fortunate to be raised in a loving, caregiving environment. They're in you to a considerable degree, right? We're connected. We depend on each other. We're mutually dependent or interdependent as human beings. Of course, there's wider spans and connections of interdependency between ourselves and the whole world, indeed, the whole of the cosmos. Not every encounter that we have is equally impactful, of course. Some have much more lasting and significant, potent effects on us, to be sure. But it's pretty easy for us to recognize that we're relating to each other, and in that process of relating to each other, we really are experiencing direct and indirect connections with a huge network of people. You know, like whoever your grandfather would regard as his most influential person in his life gave shape to your grandfather, and your grandfather gave shape to, say, your mother, and your mother gave shape to you. So it goes synchronic, like connected at the same time with a bunch of people, so to speak, horizontally. And it's also diachronic. It occurs through time, these ripples of connection and influence, these interdependencies. Am I making sense to you so far? Okay. So because our permanent condition is one of interdependence, that social scientific observation actually lets us know something of a moral nature. Since I'm connected to you and you're connected to me, if I do you good, what happens to me? I'm going to feel it. I'm going to get it. Generally speaking, isn't it the case that you get what you give and you tend to give what you get? There's a kind of exchange that happens in everyday life. All over our lives, we have that experience. So if I serve your interests, who else is being served? I am. The healthier and happier and productive and everything, you know, whatever positive characterization you can put on it. Whatever it is that I provide to someone else, it's going to be reflected. It's going to be sent back to me in the long run, generally speaking. Now, of course, there are all kinds of momentary exceptions. You know, somebody gets some bad news, and so they're very prickly, and they're ready to go off on somebody, and it happens, and that ripples. That happens too. But that just elaborates the state of condition, or state of connection that is our permanent condition. Good, bad, or indifferent, whatever it is that we give off, other people that we're connected with receive, and we, in our turn, receive from them too. So, can you see how empathy, being able to feel and act in a way that is informed by this reality of interdependence, makes a lot of sense. It's not only so, but it's good that it's so. And it's good that we act in a manner that's calculated to produce good results for the other and for myself, because I'm the other's other. You feel me? Does that make sense? There's a guy by the name of Schopenhauer, usually gets a bad rap as a real pessimistic philosopher, but I think he said some pretty remarkable things touching this very matter. He was among the first Western philosophers to highlight the importance of empathy to our moral development, our ability to detect right from wrong, and to be able to act accordingly. For this guy, Schopenhauer, all moral actions can be expressed by the Latin phrase translated, injure no one. On the contrary, help everyone as much as you can. Doesn't sound like the words of a pessimist to me. It sounds like somebody who is recognizing reality. Now, for the egoist, the immature, selfish person whose actions are not informed by the knowledge of their condition of connection, they haven't grown up to that or awakened to that reality, and so they're not acting accordingly. For such a person, according to Schopenhauer, humanity is the non-ego. In other words, whatever is out there is not me. You're not me, you're not me, no one else is me, I'm me. I'm going to take care of me. I'm going to serve me's interests. You get me? I'm looking out for number one. I'm taking care of business. Unfortunately, that is a very, very compressed, compact, limited, constrained definition of oneself. And it doesn't necessarily produce the best results or those that we're trying to achieve. See, to the compassionate man, according to Schopenhauer, and I think according to common sense, to the compassionate person, it is not, the other is not non-ego, not me, but myself once more. You're like me. You're a subject just like me, looking out from your eyeballs and having your experience. You're a human being. You're a person with desires and ambitions and hopes and dreams and worries and fears and the whole jumble just like me. So I know something about you. And I know that you know something about me because our experience is really quite shared. This is the recognition of the essential connectedness of all life. And I do mean beyond the merely human, but certainly it includes all people. All human beings are connected to a greater or lesser degree. Some of those more obvious, more immediate, more impactful, to be sure. Now, there's a guy by the name of Terence, who was a playwright most active in the 2nd century before the Common Era. So a long time ago, this guy wrote, I am human, and I think nothing human is alien to me. There really is no non-ego. There's nowhere that I can look to someone who is human and not be able to identify with that, to feel that connection, to understand, which is to say, to more or less accurately imagine how life is from your point of view. And you, from your point of view, look on a world and encounter people, and for you, every one of them is human, therefore, not really alien. Now, do we ever understand everything that everybody does all the time? Of course not. Can we sympathize with everything that people are up to and everything along those lines? Of course not. But in the main, we can understand. Feeling other as self. What distinguishes the person who lives up to their human potential? The person who's really grown up, who is developed. Not perfect, but they realize some of their potential, their capacity for growth, for learning. Such a person is distinguished by their capacity to respond to another's joys and concerns as if they were their very own. So when I hear somebody tell me about a sad thing that they're going through, I can feel that. I recognize that. Yeah, that's a feature in my life experience too. I get it. I'm there with you. I feel you. I understand. The basis for such a shared feeling is our actual embodied condition as beings in relationship. See, nobody is an island, isolated, cut off, separate, distinct from all others. In fact, even if you're alone, say you're sent to prison or you're marooned on an island or what have you, of course you can feel very lonely, but you're still carrying the residue, the tracery of all these connections and conversations and shared projects and collaborations. Every connection imprints itself on us, on our minds, on our hearts. All of that is permanently engraved in who we are. Am I making sense to you? I wrote embodied condition as beings in relationship because it's the reality is all the way down to our physical makeup. Like, for example, every time you eat a meal, something, plant, fungus, animal, that life is given up so that you can live. Every time you take in a morsel of food, you're living by the life of another. That physical reality of your dependence upon the other is no less real than, for example, the fact that some of the ideas that you've been exposed to, say, in a class that you particularly enjoy, is now part of your mental makeup. The way that you think, the way that you see, the way that you make sense is different for having internalized something that started out there and came in here, right? Just like with food, just like with air, just like with care. Somebody shows you a little affection, you respond in kind, and you share that moment or that lifetime of care. We're connected. Interdependence, the human condition. We are connected to such an extent that touching one touches all. It's like when you throw the stone in the pond and it's a still day, and you watch the concentric circles go out and out and out and out and out and out. And it spreads throughout the entire surface of this pond. Every time that you have an encounter with someone, they're getting into you and you're getting into them. There's an exchange at a soul level between you. So there's physical connection and physical exchanges. There's emotional connections and exchanges, mental exchanges, spiritual exchanges. The ripples go out and touch everything and everyone. Now, this is the case even when we're too insensitive to detect it at our present level of moral development. That is, a little kid ain't going to get this, or somebody that's been raised in a caregiving environment that was wanting, that was missing something, they're going to have difficulty getting this. This requires achieving a certain level of awareness and capacity for feeling for another person in a way that is truly empathetic in nature. As we grow, as we develop, as we become more mature, the measure of that, the index of that, and the means by which we experience it and grow in it is through this exchange, this caregiving that arises in response to the recognition of oneself in the other and of the other in oneself. Like I get, for example, when I'm teaching a class, how some, let's say I share some idea that I came up with or some experience that I had that I found particularly meaningful. And I get in a conversation with one or more students as we talk through this. And I know that those thoughts are making their way into the minds and hearts of people who will then have opportunity to share out of that and act out of that for the rest of their lives. And of course, in those conversations, I'm getting fed, I'm receiving, which makes it more possible and indeed more enjoyable for me to share right back again some more. The give and take of this exchange, even in ordinary conversation, is such that we touch everybody, and everybody touches us. Human being, the way of being human, is intrinsically social. No one gets to be a self without an array of others upon whom one relies for a sense of entity, that is, I exist, I am, I have being, and identity. I'm unique, I'm different from anyone else. Even though I'm influenced by everyone else, the way that it sorts out, the combination that is me, is unique in all the universe. That particular combination from all the connections that I've enjoyed and at the particular times in which I've enjoyed them have given shape to who I am. And as I interact with others, whatever I get, I give. And whatever I give, I get. You get it? Just making sense. All right. Empathy as a measure of growth. Our individual evolution is measurable precisely in terms of our ability to accurately imagine the other's subjective experience and to respond appropriately. So, I am as grown up as my capacity to see you as a subject, just like me, as a human being, with thoughts and feelings and dreams and aspirations and pains and all that, everything. To see you as myself, but another one, another one, another one, another myself. You get me? It's a little poetic, but I'm asking you to stretch your mind and understand that as a consequence of a lot of people behaving like that, because they see it so, in other words, I recognize the connection and it informs my choices. If I can do you good and we're connected, I'm doing myself good. If I can provide you with an opportunity, an opening for you to do me some good, I'm doing you some good and myself some good. This is the way it is. And it's a reality that's consistent with this aspiration, this goal, this high condition of empathy. This means offering support with expressions of esteem. You're good, you're okay. Attaboy, attagirl. Solidarity. You and I stand together. I'm watching your back, you watch mine. And assistance, actually providing what the other needs in the moment, whether it's a pat on the back or a stern warning or whatever the situation demands, that would be an expression of genuine care for the other as if the other was myself. Esteem, solidarity, and assistance that answer the felt need of the other. Not what I think you need, what I understand you think you need. At least in your best moments. Responding to the other to serve the other's interests from a place of a generous spirit that knows ultimately it's coming back. What goes around comes around. Now, we've been taught all our lives that we have a name, and we have a body, and we have a reputation, and we have possessions, and we have this, and we have that. And these are mine. I, me, mine. And we start out, of course, unable to make distinctions of any kind whatsoever. You know what one of the crucial moments in the development of this separate sense of self is? Maybe you remember your own experience. Maybe you have a little brother or sister or nephews and nieces. Do you remember when a kid, maybe a year and a half, 2 years old, is moving around and they're now mobile? You know, they've gone from crawling to, or rather from sort of pre-crawling to actually being able to move about. And what do they hear? No, 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 honey, no, no, no. Don't touch that. No, don't go there. No, no, no. They're reaching up to get on the stove. No. They're approaching a stairway. And they're going to go down a long ways. No, 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 honey, no. Right? They hear a lot of no's. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist philosopher, said that the power of that no is huge. Because what does the kid then do? He internalizes the no. And it doesn't just set boundaries for him, he begins to say it back. So mama says, "Oh, honey, here's your broccoli." No. Right? And so from the outside, there's been no, 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 no. And now from the inside, no, 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 no. And what that does is it begins from the inside and the outside to create or to crystallize a kind of boundary between self and other. Each no from the outside and the inside is firming up the separate self-sense. Trouble is, that's a denial of, or an ignorance of, our true state of connection. The boundary is artificial. It's useful, it's important, it's good that it's there, but we have to grow past the limits of that. We can't just say no. We have to learn how to collaborate in the awakened awareness of our state, our condition of perennial connection. And so we have to outgrow that limited, I'm a separate self notion. We have to move beyond its rather constraining limitations on us. Our care, in other words, has to go beyond the boundary of ego, beyond what Alan Watts called the skin-encapsulated ego. You don't end at your skin. You know this. We could speak of the body ending there, but even that doesn't make sense because you're taking in matter, consuming it, eliminating it. It's going in and out with every breath, with every morsel of food and visit to the bathroom. Right? It's a constant exchange. And each of us is a roughly similar participant in this exchange network. But it also happens to be the case that when, for example, you have a conversation with someone, you bring a particular attitude, maybe an agenda into the conversation, and you say what you're going to say, and they respond to that, and back and forth, and give and take. And some of you's going into them, and some of them's coming into you, right? On a soul level, you know, ideas exchanged, plans dreamed up, sometimes projects and their artifacts created in these collaborative moments. That exchange is hugely productive. on every level. It's happening all over the place. So we have to see past this limited view of ourselves and understand that at the pinnacle, at the optimal level of performance, we human beings are making every choice with a view larger than I'm just going to serve my own separate selfish interests. I'm going to do for those with whom I'm connected service motivated by the same care that I intend for myself. I extend to them, to you. What I'm giving, I'm getting. What I'm getting, I'm giving. Can you see this? Making sense? If you have questions, I'm happy to take them, but maybe we'll save it till later if you've not moved to do it now. There is a scary side. Is that a "you're going too long and we want to get out of here" clap, or is that a I would appreciate your courtesy. I understand that you're to be dismissed at 7:30. Is that the case? Well, you hang with me for a while longer. I'll see that you're richly rewarded. I need you to chill now. There is a scary side to empathy, not least because life necessarily involves suffering. So, feeling with someone else usually means sharing some pain. Some joys too, some everyday stuff, but certainly some pain is coming our way if we have a heart open towards the others in our lives, recognizing that they're selves just like us. In other words, I take seriously the fact that you need, just like I need, people to relate to me in a way that is truly empathetic, to imagine what I'm feeling and act accordingly, just like I do for you. But it's going to cost me sometimes. I'm going to feel it. Sometimes life is tough on us, and there's no justice. It's not fair. It's just awful stuff happens sometimes. Well, what happens if we keep our hearts open in that moment? Both as witnesses to the pain and as the primary targets of it. What happens? Well, when you're being present to someone else's pain, you're not only providing support for their healing, but it's going to grow you up too, because you're going to get real. It's going to tenderize your heart because you have to acknowledge that life is pain. Suffering is inevitable. But in the company of others with whom I can share that and get understanding and support and sometimes assistance, it's bearable. I can deal. And that reality grows me up. That reality makes it possible, for example, for after life's tenderized me with a good beating, I can more easily relate to somebody else who's going through some of the same pain. I'm not untouched by their affliction. When they hurt, I really feel it, because I know what it's like to be there. I've been through that particular meat grinder, thank you very much. So I'm not untouched by the pain of another, because heart open, I encounter them, recognize that they're just like me. So I can feel what they feel, and I can respond accordingly, with the compassion, the empathy, that the moment requires, because we're connected. And if I do them good, it's coming back. Now, this starts out tough. Empathy operates best when it's spontaneous, when it's unforced. But just like many other skills, I mentioned playing a musical instrument here, it could be skiing. You know, whatever it is that you're doing the first time, don't you fall down a lot? Hello? Yeah. Sometimes you even take a few hits in the early going of a thing. Certainly, you can sometimes be embarrassed by your performance. It's not so good. Anybody play violin? Okay. Well, the first time you played violin, could you practically not stand to be in the same room with yourself? That's right. It takes a while for it to stop being noise, right? It's like this with empathy, too. It starts out very self-conscious and effortful. But as we grow, as we mature, as our capacity for care really does grow, it becomes spontaneous. We've practiced it to the extent that it arises unbidden. It just shows up, the response of care. Our heart's being tenderized, and I get that I'm connected, so of course I'm going to care. Of course I'm going to feel with you. Of course. But it doesn't start out like falling off a log, as they say. We have to grow into it. Eventually, it can cultivate a disposition of feeling with that can feel automatic. It just arises from deep inside us, from a place that is acquainted with suffering and knows we're connected. Empathy is the result of the recognition of connection, a core feature of the highest possible moral development. This is called by different names across different faith communities and wisdom traditions. Some people call it enlightenment, others liberation, some people salvation. But it's a condition of maturity that results in spontaneous care, radiant affection, and awareness. I know that we're connected, and I know that doing you good does me good. I get it. It may be played out in various ways across different cultures, but it's at the heart of all lasting notions of ethical behavior. Every ethical system around the planet is informed by people's direct intuition of empathy. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Or, that's the golden rule, the platinum rule. Do unto others as they would wish to have done to themselves. Like, I know what you're thinking, I know what you're feeling, so I'm going to give you what I know you need and want. I'm motivated because it's coming back. Not just because it's coming back, but because I've learned to take delight in the joy and the relief of the other. And to walk with them in times that are too unspeakably painful to put into words. Here's a parting wish. Our native narcissism, our inborn selfishness. You know, what does a baby know of empathy? It just cries out based on its need. It uses the only tool that it has to get what it needs now and now and now. But eventually, baby looks out and sees another and supplies its need. Because baby is growing into toddler and young child and so on. And every time we undergo a developmental enlargement, we contain more of the world. We're more capable of identifying with the experience of more and more of the world. So that the limits of my care are the limits of my maturity, which corresponds to the limits of myself. I will serve as if myself those that I can identify with. And if I see them as other, then they're cut off. That just means I need to grow past that. I need to push through that particular boundary and include, transcend, go beyond, and include more and more of the world. That's the path of empathy. That's the path of growth as a human being. Our native narcissism can only be outgrown if we learn to feel and act out of our certainty of connection. You are connected to everything and everyone. Some of those are more obvious connections, again, some of them more impactful, but the connection is clear. So how should we then live? How should we behave in light of that fact? That incontrovertible, self-evident, of course, obviously it's the case fact, in a way that is consistent with that knowledge. I must extend to the other what I intend for myself. So here's my parting wish. May we all be so fortunate that we're able to care our way beyond the limits of our prison house of selfishness. It's so often the case that we get slammed and we feel every urge to retreat, to put up the shields, to go home, to quit it, to pull in, pull back, withdraw. Silent treatment serves you right, right? But eventually, the flower has to open again. This self-contraction that knots us up and keeps our shields in place. That way lies a solitary and false way of life. Life is about sharing with the others with whom we are always already connected. So I'm hoping for you that hearing this, it may trigger something, may get you thinking, it may help you to consider the matter when next life presents you with an opportunity to extend care or to withhold. And in that moment, you'll remember, maybe it's worth running the risk of seeing the other person as myself. Thank you for your kind attention. And I got you out 1 minute ahead of time. Good evening, everybody.